Okay, let me know once you can see my screen so that we can proceed.
Looking good.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's Cloud Friday. My name is Glen, Tsime, and I'll be co-presenting with Warren. He will be doing some goodness of some nice demo that he has. So I just want to go through some quick boring slides and just be out of the way of 2020. I've had enough of COVID. So yeah. So just to kickstart, think of Azure Arc like this. So I know I just took a dump shape somewhere from the internet, but I wonder what inspired Microsoft to actually call this nice, very valuable service Arc. So an arc, so this is a form of this shape. Mathematically, they'll tell you it's an angle of 90 degrees minus 30, but eventually Microsoft came to this. They made it all fancy. I mean, moving from what we just saw from the previous screen to this. So this is an icon when you do some Visio diagrams. So this is what you'll need for Arc. So as your Arc, I wouldn't want to read through everything, but as you can see on the screen, it can run data everywhere. But in short, and what Satya Nadella said, it is a control plane that extends management, enable the built-in Azure services to run anywhere. So you can run them from your on-prem, from other cloud providers. I think Warren will be doing that, and also on the edge. So now, myself, I've been following through Azure Arc, and there's been quite a number of updates that were pushed on Ignite. But I always ask myself whether Azure Arc, is it a replacement or is it Azure Stack? It was a bit confusing. Then I later learned that no, Azure Arc is just an extension just to make sure that you have a unified environment that all can appear seamlessly in Azure. But that doesn't replace your traditional Azure Stack, where you can have your full-blown Azure service running inside your data center. So when we look traditionally in Azure, you will obviously have your customers coming through whatever ways, tools, and experiences that they have interacting with the ARM, Azure Resource Manager. Obviously, there will be a single pane of management. You'll do your RBAC, you'll do your cloud native practices. There is security built in and compliance, governance. And then you still have those customers who would want to retain their investment on-prem. We do have one customer of ours who said, I mean, I just bought these x86 servers. I just bought these SQL licenses. I still want to run some of my logic on-prem and not expose anything in Azure. But I would want to see everything on one single pane of glass. So Azure Arc, it will then come into play whereby you can extend the management of your current infrastructure running in Azure, but also on-premise and on the edge. So Azure Arc, it's a growing service. It's still in its early maturity phases. But for now, we do have Azure Arc enabled servers. We also have Azure Arc enabled SQL Server and Kubernetes. I hope they will onboard more services, but to be honest with you, it is up to the type of experience or the type of path that you use. I mean, myself, I'm not an AKS guy. I'm more into SQL, I'm more into servers. So it will make sense for me to work with those services. But however, that doesn't stop you from exploring, right? So why should we do Arc? Okay, the first thing is inventory and organization. So when it comes to inventory, and from what I've seen, it's slightly confusing because you might think of the traditional inventory that you want to keep about servers, CPUs, anything that goes with IT inventory. But from what I've seen tags being more useful than anything else in Arc. So especially when you onboard servers, it gives you a nice, follow through to say, okay, this server is sitting in this data center. A good use case of that can be cost centers, right? So you'd want to know, okay, which machines are sitting in which data centers. I mean, if you can imagine, you have now servers migrated into Azure, you still have some on-prem. So the inventory management between the two, it will be slightly different or difficult, and also to organize everything on one. When it comes to governance and config, yes, we do have governance policies that we are following on-prem. But now, how do we extend those into the cloud? Obviously, this is where you'll meet Azure Policy. If you've worked with Azure Policy, you will appreciate the features and the stuff that it gives you back. So you can also like centralize the likes of configuration. The nice thing and cool thing, I think Warren will cover it on the demo, is integrating DevOps and all these management capabilities. You can use your native Terraform, a new kid on the block. I hope you guys are very much familiar with Terraform. I love it so much. And also with unified tools. I mean, it's the same experience, the same Azure portal, the same PowerShell that I love, and everything is still the same. So Azure Arc, it's still continuing into its phases of being that mature, but from what it can do and what I've seen it can do, it's actually a cool product. So for enabled servers, I won't go through everything. Obviously, for now, they support Linux and Windows, obviously. And also you can work and onboard your VMs, bare metal, or any other virtual machines that are running on other clouds. Okay, so, and what is nice is searchable inventory at scale. So you can use Graph API to query all your resources under one query, and then they will come back and say, how many servers do I have in my enterprise? So it can scan on both your cloud and your on-prem, only if you've onboarded those servers to appear in Azure as Arc enabled servers. And also the nice thing I've seen is the use of the extensions, and the one I like most is the desired state config. So now you can have a unified experience of your DSC where you want to maintain state of all your machines. Perhaps you have your web servers, you want to ensure that IIS is always installed. Yes, you can run it in Azure, but now what about those machines that are in cloud? So normally you'd have two DSC configs, and that will confuse a lot. And people are not much using automation, Azure automation. So it's a nice, neat feature that they've built in. And also with the likes of Azure policies, where you can now set audits and remediation across your two environments. At the end, you need your on-prem. Azure Arc is not something like Hyper-V, whereby you install it and then you run servers on top. No, Azure Arc is just an arm, an extension, an API extension to your on-prem. And the nice thing is you can also enable RBAC on your machines as well. This looks familiar. So whenever you deploy your VMs in Azure, you will have your log analytics for logging and monitoring and everything. And this is the part where I like most, the desired state config. Then it has the Arc Azure. So everything that you onboard from your on-prem that is alien to Azure, it will have a tag Azure Arc. And also custom script extension for Windows, where you can be able to execute your scripts, both running the script sitting in cloud and sitting on-prem. So you can have your script sitting on a storage account, and then you can just call those and also push them down to your on-prem machines. And then we have Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. I mean, this is where now you can now bring over your on-prem Kubernetes clusters right into Azure for management. And you can also deploy workloads from Azure to those machines. So you can also scale across two environments. And also you can use the likes of GitOps, GitHub, whatever you name it. And also you can use policies in order to monitor and manage at scale. So if you still have your clusters, your OpenShift, your Ubuntu, whatever cluster you have on-prem, you can bring it into Azure and let it coexist with the current clusters that you have. And then for SQL Server, the nice thing is, I mean, it's SQL, right? So you can also onboard your SQL servers that you do not want to, move over to Azure, let them sit down there, let the logic and data and processing happen in Azure, but we just need to at least see them in Azure and be able to do a head count on them. So obviously you have the flexibility of being able to deploy and scale, especially the one I love. It's a PostgreSQL hyperscaler that you can deploy also on Kubernetes clusters. So it's a cool, nice feature. I'm keen to learn more about that. I know our presenters with their vast experience on upcoming sessions will probably cover those. And then obviously you can now secure, you can have the security features enabled through Azure Security Center, whereby you can protect your data using advanced data protection or advanced data security that you have natively when you deploy SQL in Azure. Now it can go down there to your SQL servers and protect those. Now, that is my part. I would want to give Warren some time also respecting his cutoff by 10 so he can be able to share with us. Thank you so much, guys. Over to you, Warren.
Thanks, dude. Nicely done. Yeah, unfortunately, when we think about cutoffs, working for Microsoft, no rest for the wicked, right? Hey, Alfredo. He's not even here yet. Okay, cool. Let me do a quick share of my screen, and then we can do a quick checkpoint to make sure that you guys can see it. Okay, cool. It's looking good. All right. So just to sort of give you some sort of indication of where I got this stuff from, Microsoft have gone and created a Git repository called Azure Arc. And inside this, there are various different Arc deployments, from data to Kubernetes to SQL Server, even with backpack files so that you can deploy an Arc-enabled database. You've got the server jump starts as well as a overview and a bit of like a Fabricam sort of story that runs with it that gives you all of your different scenarios that you would use Arc for, which is quite cool. So you'll see that you can go to the Arc-enabled servers piece, and then it will give you templates and stuff that you can use to deploy using Vagrant, using Terraform in AWS. And this is obviously what I used. So you can go ahead and you can use this yourself. You just have to adapt things and follow the instructions. So to jump into it quickly is, if we look, this is my AWS portal, and you can see I've only got one instance running currently inside EC2. And then you'll see under the Kubernetes, you'll see I've got one Kubernetes cluster over here. And that's this Arc EKS, which I deployed a little bit earlier. Now, to show you how I deployed it. So inside, I basically checked out this repo. So this is the EKS Terraform piece, and I went and I updated the specific variables to include the things that I needed in order for it to authenticate against AWS. I ran a Terraform plan and then a Terraform apply. And the reason I did this beforehand was AWS is a little bit slow. So we got a 13-minute there that just happened, and we were able to then create a Kubernetes cluster. And you can see by running a get context, I was able to then put the context in, and now you can see what I'm running over there. Okay, so this I did beforehand with Terraform. I can do a destroy as well, which is great, so that you can scale these machines, you can deploy them, and you can destroy them just as easy as you normally would. So now what I'm going to do is I want to kick off a Ubuntu deployment in parallel. So what I've got is I have another one over here where you can see I did a destroy as I was testing this morning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do an apply auto approve, which I've gone and I've done for this Ubuntu deployment. And you'll see what it's going to do now is it's going to go and it's going to deploy a machine into AWS, an Ubuntu machine. But then as part of the same Terraform scaffolding, it's going to deploy the Arc agent and connect that server into Azure so that you can see that server inside of Azure and you can see it become a first-class citizen. So you'll see, just to give you some more information about what that actually does. So if we have to go look at the code inside of GitHub, you'll see we can go to Azure Arc Servers Jumpstart. And then you can go to AWS. You can go to Ubuntu Terraform. This is what I used, scripts. And you can see that essentially what it's going to do is it's going to run this install agent piece. Now, this is obviously important because this is something that you can do on some of your existing servers that are already running. So it's going to install a hybrid agent. And then there's going to be an AZC magnet, which will be the connect. And then you put your service principals and your tenant IDs. Now, I've gone and I've done all this already in the background. And you'll see that what will happen is as this Terraform starts going through, you'll start seeing this machine being deployed and onboarded into Arc. So if we go back here, you should actually start seeing the server deploying into EC2. There we go. So you can see there, Arc AWS demo is being deployed over there. And then what we'll do is we can go back to resource groups. And now this is my Azure tenant. And now we don't see anything in this resource group yet, but we just give it a couple secs. And you can see it's busy updating the Ubuntu server and it's busy installing the Arc agent via Terraform. So while that's happening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Kubernetes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to now do a onboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this guy here so that I can I'm creating a resource group inside of Azure using the AZ command inside of EastUS. So this is an existing running EKS. I've gone and I've created that. Now what I'm going to do is I want to onboard this Kubernetes server. So now what I'm doing is I'm running the AZ connected K8S. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm onboarding the EKS cluster into Arc. And you'll see that that'll pop up inside of my portal pretty soon. So let's go and let's have a look at this here. Cool. All right. So the Terraform completed. Life is good. We go back here. We can see that our instances are good too. This guy's running. And now, if everything went well, bam. There's the Ubuntu server onboarded as a server into Azure Arc from AWS. And as Glenn said a little bit earlier, what we can do is we can now go in. Now, again, it is PowerShell based. But what you can do now is you can see that you've got all the information around the operating system version, the agent version that's running. You can do so you can add monitoring as far as log analytics is concerned. You can do insights, policies, change tracking, as well as update management or desired state configuration, all from this. Again, also, you can go ahead and you can tag this resource as if it were an Azure resource, except this is running in AWS. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do now on all your different clouds using Azure itself. And again, all of this stuff is supported by IAC. So the whole infrastructure is code, the whole DevOps. You can configure all of your landing zones, your Azure policies, all via code. And as soon as these servers get onboarded into the subscription, those same policies will apply down to these resources. So you can see that this one's now connected. All right, so now what we'll do, go back to here. And there we go. Cool. So this operation might take a while. Seems like we're good. Finished. Happy days. So now what we can do is we can go back into resource groups. I'll do a refresh. There's the resource group that I created via the command line. And there we go. There you can see we have a Kubernetes Azure Arc, which is now running inside of EKS. Now, look, I like to add this to the demo, but the thing is we might actually run out of time. I don't know why AWS takes so long to upgrade their Kubernetes, but it just does. So what will happen is you'll see you'll see this one here, this Kubernetes version 1.172. So what I would do normally as part of the demo, but we might run out of time, is I would go in here to the Elastic Kubernetes service here, and we go and we do an update now, and we say that we want to update to version 1.18. Unfortunately, it does take a while, so I might just end the demo and do some questions. But essentially what will happen is you'll see this Kubernetes version will become 1.18, and then you'll see inside of Azure itself, this will also become 1.8 EKS. And you can see that there's live updating so that you can manage your Kubernetes clusters inside of Azure, although running in EKS. Again, you can also enable GitOps integration where you can add configurations to the Kubernetes services. And again, this is not just EKS. This will work any Kubernetes. So it'll work with your OpenShift. And you'll see if we go back to the jump starts and you go to K8S, you'll see we've got Rancher K3S in there as well. We've also got Google Cloud. We've also got the OpenShift over here. So all of these templates are available for you to use and for you to check and see and play and destroy and et cetera, et cetera. And so you'll see if you keep going down, you'll see we've got stuff for VMware. We've got custom script extensions for the DSC so that you can deploy as well. So all of the different scenarios that you would need to use are here. And I think that's it from me. That's Arc being deployed by Terraform. So if there's any questions, please do post them in the chat.
I'm not going to post in the chat. I'm going to come off mute and ask a question.
Sounds good.
So in some of your code, you have some service principles.
Yes.
What kind of access does that service principle need on the Azure side?
So you'll see in the documentation, we do, and I'll show you here now. This was the AWS one. Contributor.
Okay, because it needs to add the resource into your resource group, whatever it is that you're managing. So it needs contributor. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then what I wanted.
Yeah.
No, what I wanted to say is that your demo is all very cool and very geeky, but essentially what it allows is for you to use Azure as your control plane for everything.
Yes, that's exactly what it does. So the thing is, let me just share my screen again. So from a Kubernetes perspective, obviously, yes, super, super geeky. When it comes to policies on the cluster, compliance, remediation, et cetera, that all happens Azure policy. But if we go and we look at the server itself, right? So this is where the awesomeness is over here, because you now have the ability to manage and update your Linux and Windows boxes from here, okay? So you can then, it doesn't matter where they are, you can use one centralized place for you to manage and maintain those operating system patches, et cetera, as well as the fact that you must remember, as soon as you start taking the logging of these servers and start pushing them into log analytics, you then open up Sentinel, you open up Security Center, and you open up all of the additional capabilities that you could use that you would normally take advantage of inside of Azure. So the advanced threat protection, and us being able to take Sentinel and tell you this is what's happening here, or this server is being logged too many times there, et cetera, as well as the monitoring insights. So you can now go and you can say, okay, well, these servers are getting incredibly busy at this time of the month, et cetera, et cetera. But doesn't matter where these servers are running. I mean, they could be running in AWS, because obviously from a multi-cloud perspective at Microsoft, they realize that, well, I can say we realize that multi-cloud and hybrid cloud is not going anywhere. So as a result, all of this, and again, RBAC, think about it. So if you have to look at all the conditional access, the MFA, all that lovely stuff that you've gone and you've set up inside of your Azure Active Directory, now will apply to these resources as well.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if everybody, I initially underestimated, what Azure Arc was. I thought it was just sort of, a gimmicky way of showing that you could do stuff like you do in Azure with your on-premises servers, your SQL, your Kubernetes, or somewhere other cloud stuff. But the power is immense, because now you can use the agility and the speed that, and all those monitoring and security controls that you have in Azure. You can apply those all across the board. So it's actually,
and we take it one step further as well. Let's talk a little bit about the data side. So now what also happens is you can go and use Azure Data Studio, okay, to connect to a SQL server through Azure, but that's not in Azure. So what we're doing is we're allowing you to unify the tool set that you would normally use. So if you, let's say, wanted to use Azure Data Studio to make modifications and administer the databases that were inside of Azure, you can now use the same thing, but different database workloads sitting wherever they may be. So we're unifying the control plane for data services as well, so that you can manage those SQL services, and it's only going to get bigger. So Postgres, hyperscale, et cetera, that's all going to happen in time. But for now, I mean, you can go and you can deploy a SQL server anywhere, and then you can manage it using Azure Data Studio, using your Azure Active Directory account.
Warren, since you are here, Glen here, I would love to see this tool being matured to a point whereby I can be able to do RDP on those Arc servers just from the portal there. Please, can you just try to push it on your side, from the Microsoft side? Because really, I would really appreciate it. I mean, being able to use like Bastion or jump boxes from Azure and, link them back to those Arc servers.
But you see, the thing is this, though, is about, if you have to think about the progression and the way things work, or where we're moving to as far as cloud is concerned, you shouldn't be RDPing to that box in the first place. All of your deployment methodologies, your CI/CD, your desired state configuration, your policies, all of that stuff should be done programmatically. Those servers should be deployed via a pipeline. They should be updated via update management, et cetera, et cetera. There's no reason for you to RDP to a server anymore if you're using the infrastructure as code continuous delivery methodologies.
Yeah, sure, great. That was a good question there and a good answer. And I hope everyone who's listening through, no more RDP, guys, please. Infrastructure as code.
We do have a question from Peter. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to point out the question in the chat.
Thank you, Matt. So we have a question from Peter Human. Can you connect a front-end tool like Power BI to the data in AWS via Arc?
So are we talking about data inside a data workload, or are you talking about the monitoring data or logs of services inside of AWS? So the idea would be, if we're looking at metrics and monitoring and things like that, it's going to be pumped into a log analytics account, and then your Power BI will connect to the log analytics data, if that's the way you want to go. Or alternatively, I guess if you had to use the control plane as Azure Data Studio would use, and you connected Power BI into that using a connector, I suppose that would work too, if that answers your question.
I think the context here. Go on, Peter.
Yeah, let me just clarify. So I'm working in BI. So from a BI point of view, for example, if you build a dashboard and now you've got a Azure Amazon Redshift database sitting in AWS, can you use Arc to connect to that Redshift database and get the data out, and your Power BI sitting in your Azure side?
I think you probably could, to be honest. I'd have to double check Redshift specifically, but yes, I don't see why not. As long as it's onboarded as a resource inside of Azure Arc, you should be able to query it using a normal connection string.
Cool, thanks.
That's quite significant. Let me ask a follow-up question to that. So are you saying that as long as I've got a database under management through Arc, no matter where it is in the world, I can actually use Arc as a that? Yes, a gateway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can actually. Let me see if I can actually find the. It's called the Azure Arc Data Controller. So if we have to look, I'll just show you the link briefly, and then you guys can have a look at it yourself. And here we've got this Azure Arc Data Controller over here with the current supported services. And if you have to look, so currently, okay, you've got Postgres Hyperscale and you've got SQL Managed Instance. And then what happens is you'll see you can then create a data controller with the Data Studio and connect to it and perform all sorts of queries, etc., etc. But obviously, we're expanding it as we go. So you'll see that in a couple of months, this will probably become a little bit more. So you can see we've got monitoring, we've got billing data, all sorts of stuff. You can connect you for your data workloads.
How performant do you expect that to be?
What do you mean?
Well, you're putting a gateway in front of something and then you're querying it. So I guess it's only as fast as the component pieces put together.
Yeah, look, I don't think that you would want to have your applications query the database through this. This is more around reporting and BI analytics, those sorts of things, I suppose, could probably, but I don't, maybe at some point we'll create it so that you can use us as a connection.
If you don't mind just sharing that link in the chat as well, please.
With pleasure. Oh no, wait, I can't type. I don't know why. Why can't I type? Give me 1 sec. I will paste it as somebody else. There you go. Cool. And that's it from me.